communist, a threat to America, who's incompatible with the governing style of America? You think he's incompatible with the governing style of America?
His values
Trump
are
doesn't think that.
Trump is wrong on this case.
You think Trump is wrong on this case?
Zohran Mamdani's principles are fundamentally hostile to the founding principles.
Progressive commentator Adam Mockler appeared on CNN's Phillip tonight as part of a panel that underscored a familiar pattern in contemporary political debate. Several conservative participants relied heavily on alarmist language, repeatedly invoking terms like socialism and communism as broad indictments rather than engaging with specific policies or measurable outcomes. This approach has become a standard tactic on the right, especially when confronting Democratic figures or left-leaning proposals. Mockler's presence shifted the dynamic of the discussion. Rather than allowing vague ideological labels to go unchallenged, he pressed for clarity and substance, highlighting how these buzzwords are often deployed to generate fear instead of understanding. The exchange offered a clear example of how cable news panels can either recycle talking points or, when pushed, expose the weaknesses behind them, setting the stage for a deeper conversation about how political narratives are constructed and sold to the public.
Tonight, a surreal love fest between Donald Trump and the next mayor of New York. Zohran Mamdani visiting the White House today in a meeting that had to be seen to be believed. In light of what each man has said about each other over the last few months, this was extraordinary.
He's a communist. We're going to go to a communistic state. That's so bad for New York. I think I met with a man who's a very rational person. I met with a man who really wants to see New York be great again.
If there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power.
And I've been called much worse than a despot, so it's not that insulting. Maybe I think he'll change his mind after we get to working together.
I am Donald Trump's worst nightmare as a progressive Muslim immigrant who actually fights for the things that I believe in. What I really appreciate about the president is that the meeting that we had focused not on places of disagreement.
The Mamdani thing is it's a disaster waiting to happen. We can't have a communist in charge of a great, supposedly free enterprise, kind of a representative city.
Would you feel comfortable living in New York City under a Mamdani administration?
Yeah, I would. I really would, especially after the meeting.
Our city is under attack by an authoritarian Trump administration.
Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay. You can just say yes. Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
Trump walked back his threats to cut funding to New York, and tonight he even posted photos of the visit saying the meeting was a great honor. Errol, what's going on? I mean, Zohran Mamdani won because he was opposed to Trump.
Well,
how's this going to play?
The city of New York won because there was a non-zero chance that there would be National Guard troops and chaos in the streets, even before the inauguration of Mamdani. So it's great that that's not necessarily going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen imminently. Mm-hmm. I think, look, there are a couple of things that are going on. One is that Mamdani came the way you're supposed to come to Donald Trump. You come with strength, and you come with some kind of notoriety, with some popularity. So he didn't just win the election. He won in a way that nobody's ever seen before. He went from 1% in the polls to winning the Democratic primary in about 6 months. He's got a certain amount of celebrity. President Trump noted that there were more press there, international press included, than for some heads of state. That gets the attention of somebody like a Donald Trump. And I guess finally, look, it is part of the Trump story. The Trump family fortune came from working with mayors and local officials in New York. And I think it's just kind of hardwired into him that being friendly with the mayor of New York can be a very lucrative proposition.
He said he used to want that job.
Absolutely.
It actually is a bit surprising he never actually did it. But, Brianna, Republicans are planning to run against Mamdani and to paint Democrats as communists, whatever. Now that seems to be completely out the window. How do you even do that?
I think Republicans should still stick with that strategy. Okay. I have very mixed feelings on today. I think the president, to your point, did what an executive would do. Whether you like Mamdani or not, he is running the largest city in America. You are going to have some kind of conversation with him. And it's nice that they had a cordial conversation today. I don't discount that. I also think that Donald Trump is kind of setting the stage here. He's leaving a line of communication open so that when Mamdani actually does take office and starts implementing policies, there could be communication where Donald Trump says, hey, I don't think you should do that, or we're going to have problems. That being said, I was disappointed. I think, one, in Mamdani, when he was asked if he still thinks Donald Trump is a fascist, and he was, I'm not going to answer.
Let me, can I just,
yeah, go ahead.
Let me just play it, because honestly, you have to listen to it to understand, to do it justice. Listen.
Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay. You can just say yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
I wish he would have explained it. That's the part. Like, you interrupt him so he can explain it.
I mean,
know you
Trump
say
just completely
Trump just is like, don't worry about it,
him out.
But you know
of
what?
that
Though,
answer.
they're both talented. Believe it. Like you say, with your charisma, great politicians, great businessmen, and what we saw was good old-fashioned gaming. They were sitting there and they understood that they both needed something from one another. They both understand, Trump especially, that this is a rising star. I want to get a little bit of whatever this is that you have on you because I recognize it in me, and so I'm enjoying it. But what I think is really interesting is that that's just for now. There could be 2 or 3 or 4 things that will be true. Like today, it was nice. It was great. I was surprised. I was like, okay, this, to your point, not on my bingo card, but I was surprised to see how well they got along. But it makes sense because while they're on 2 different sides of the spectrum, there's a lot that they have in common.
Well, okay, so I agree. They're both extremely charming. I wasn't surprised, actually, by this. I didn't think either one of them were going to go in there trying to say, I'm the bigger man, even though we know that obviously the president is, just because of his position.
I thought Trump was definitely going to do that.
I didn't, because Donald Trump is the same kind of man who has made it clear he's willing to meet with anybody. And I think actually today is going to be problematic for Democrats, because Mamdani did what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are not willing to do, and that is to sit down with the president and try to find some kind of common ground here.
Or be complimentary.
I've heard that
or just be cordial.
Yeah.
I have heard that talking point, but I'm not sure I buy it.
Yeah.
I do.
Because at the end of the day, the biggest weapon facing what Republicans are facing next year, which is going to be a really tough re-election for members in the House and the Senate, the economy being what it is, Trump's policies being as popular as they are, the biggest thing that they had that they could potentially run on is the S word, socialist, the C word, communist. I was always skeptical that argument would work, but now Trump has taken it off the table.
Yeah.
What stood out most in that moment wasn't simply the substance of the exchange, but the reaction it triggered across the panel and for viewers alike. Abby Phillip's audible laughter captured something increasingly rare in mainstream political coverage, a recognition of the sheer absurdity unfolding on live television. A former president casually dismissing the label of fascist, even almost inviting it, was not just unexpected. It exposed how contradictory, performative, and at times unserious the discourse has become. The laughter wasn't meant to belittle the discussion, but reflected a natural reaction to watching political theater unravel in real time, where spectacle often overwhelms substance. The significance of this moment goes deeper, particularly when considering the mistaken notion that it might somehow neutralize the right's go-to attack lines. The assumption that a single awkward or humorous interaction would make Republicans abandon terms like socialist or communist ignores the structural habits of conservative messaging. In practice, these labels have long lost any precise meaning within much of right-leaning media. They are deployed reflexively, applied indiscriminately to anyone left of the current Republican establishment, regardless of nuanced policy positions or track records. Progressive newcomers, centrist Democrats, or even moderate officials are all lumped under the same broad ideological warnings, not because of argumentation, but because these words have become cultural signals, tools of fear, and markers of opposition rather than meaningful critiques. This exchange also casts a revealing light on Donald Trump himself. His political approach has never been grounded in consistent ideology. Instead, it has always been anchored in self-interest, opportunism, and visibility. Terms like capitalism, socialism, or any ideological label are interchangeable depending on what suits him in the moment. They are instruments rather than convictions. What captivated his attention in that panel wasn't policy alignment or legislative vision, but charisma, personal strength, and perceived influence, qualities he identifies with and values because they mirror his own sense of power. This fascination explains why he can appear to praise or engage with someone whose platform he ostensibly opposes, without disrupting his broader narrative. Even as moments like these temporarily unsettle parts of the MAGA media ecosystem, they do little to dismantle it. The machinery of conservative fear-mongering is resilient. Contradictions are ignored, inconvenient nuances are bypassed, and the same accusations are recycled repeatedly, as if nothing has shifted. In that sense, the exchange was not transformative. It didn't break or reset the system, but it was clarifying. It revealed, perhaps more starkly than many other moments, the performative nature of the discourse, the fragility of ideological consistency on the right, and the ways in which spectacle and personality often overshadow policy in the modern political media landscape. For viewers paying attention, it offered both insight and a touch of levity, a rare chance to witness how political theater can simultaneously entertain, illuminate, and expose the mechanics behind the headlines.
Zohran Mamdani, a jihadist, communist, a threat to America who's incompatible with the governing style of America. You think he's incompatible with the governing style of America?
His values
Trump
are
doesn't think
fundamental.
that.
Trump is wrong on this case.
You think Trump is wrong on this case?
Zohran Mamdani's principles are fundamentally hostile to the founding principles. His idea that we should confiscate property. John Locke, the founders, they were very clear that property rights.
Has he ever talked to
founding.
He's never said anything about confiscating.
He said he wants to take luxury
moderated two debates
condos.
that have interviewed him half a dozen times.
Then you would know that he said that.
There's no confiscation.
Hey, maybe
Then you
there's
would
a
know.
chance.
You would know that he said that. He said
means of property.
Can I just say,
and that luxury condos
this
should
is a
be taken
perfect,
if they're not in use.
this is a perfect example. The MAGA media ecosystem has made Zohran seem like this extreme jihadist.
evil
And listen,
man.
some of his ideas
The
are outside
legislation
the
he's
current political
supporting in the
spectrum.
council will force property owners before they can sell it on the public market
It's called
to
right of
sell it.
first
Why didn't Trump
to
confront
sell
him
it
about
to
that
a
the other day? Why didn't Trump confront him about it? Why was Trump
He said it was his honor.
Maybe he did.
Yeah.
Well, you know what
was
Trump
honor.
said? Trump said that we both agree on increasing
on the housing.
supply of housing, and
They're
that's
best
going
friends. They're
to
BFFs.
I'll tell you why it hasn't. I'll tell you why it hasn't taken the socialism issue off the ballot, because Zohran Mamdani's own party is facing a challenge. Because not just is Hakeem Jeffries facing a challenge from a socialist, but you have Jerry Nadler retiring and socialists running for that seat. You have Dan Goldman facing a socialist challenger. You have Grace Meng facing a socialist challenger. All these members of the House, there's probably 4 or 5 of them, are facing socialist challenges.
Although,
I
I guess we should know that Mamdani has explicitly come out against a challenger.
And this is why I
to
give him
Hakeem
credit.
Jeffries.
This is why I give him credit,
Yeah.
because he has the most to lose. He spent last night basically telling his own DSA members not to support a socialist against an establishment Democrat.
Yeah.
Now today he's out there, chumming around with Donald Trump. He has a lot to lose on this, and I give him credit for doing the right
Let
thing.
me
for the
ask
city.
you real quick on Elise Stefanik. She had a response to all of this. She says, we all want New York City to succeed, but we'll have to agree to disagree on this one. If he walks like a jihadist, if he talks like a jihadist, if he campaigns like a jihadist, if he supports jihadists, he's a jihadist. And he is Kathy Hochul's jihadist. If you're Elise Stefanik tonight, how do you feel? Because I'm not sure that works
I don't think,
anymore.
no matter what, she ain't going to take her foot off the gas. I mean, she's going to go after him. She uses the term jihadist, but if you hang out with Hassan Piker, if you hang out with people that deny 9/11 was the responsibility of Islamic terrorism, you hang out with people like that, you're going to get that criticism. That's going to be her issue. That's what she's going to push in the campaign. I don't think she's going to take her foot off the gas one bit.
Errol, why do you think Mamdani made this pivot? In a way, I mean, it is somewhat, it's smart because he neutralized Trump in especially in the first maybe 6 months of his term on some very key issues, law and order, maybe even ICE, funding for the city of New York. Why do you think he ended up here?
Well, look, Mamdani wants to succeed. He wants to be a successful mayor before he wants to do anything else. This caricature that people have painted of him as if he's some ideologue who all he's ever wanted to do is implement this ideology. He's been in office for 5 years. That is not at all what has happened. We've seen what socialist incumbents have done. If you look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they have not ended the social order. They have not overturned capitalism. Bernie Sanders has been in office for how long? He's given the same speech for a generation.
Because they're a minority within the Democratic conferences, they're still a minority. Zoran didn't pass any legislation. It doesn't mean he didn't propose and push socialist principle
attempts
legislation.
to terrify the public over people because they have the socialist word somewhere in their ideology, somewhere on their website, It just doesn't work. We
They're just
just
afraid of
put
him.
it to a vote in the biggest
That's
city.
it.
We had record turnout.
Yep.
We put it to a vote.
And that's the problem.
It didn't work.
It was put
doesn't
to a vote
work.
in the biggest city, but I bet you Abigail Spanberger couldn't run as a socialist. I bet you Mikey Sherrill couldn't run. Mikey Sherrill couldn't run as a socialist.
So the Democratic Party
So
is
I think-
fully beholden to socialism.
No. I'm saying the Democratic Party doesn't know who it is, as evidenced by the point that I just pointed out. There's 6 members of New York being primaried by socialism.
You think the Republican Party knows what they
There's
are
a
right
lot
now?
of momentum in New
Today
York.
is an illustration.
Momentum.
Today is an illustration of what I think is really going on, which is that people don't fear socialism as much as they fear what will happen if this demon that they've created actually succeeds, actually gets along with the
Correct.
president, actually keeps the streets clean and
I'm
safe.
afraid of socialism, and I want him to succeed.
And runs the
I'm the
schools
opposite.
the way they should be run.
I continue to say voters do not care about these words, okay?
Yeah,
They
they're
don't
like,
know what
in
they
one ear,
mean.
now
They
that-
don't care about them. They want
That's
to know
it.
what you're going to do for them.
Abby Phillip's closing point lands with remarkable clarity because it mirrors a reality that many viewers already sense. The right-wing media's fear-based rhetoric is not going away, but its effectiveness is steadily waning. Repeating the same alarmist accusations year after year, branding every Democrat as a socialist or a communist, only works as long as the audience still accepts it at face value. Increasingly, however, Americans are no longer buying these exaggerated warnings. For voters who have watched Democratic leaders govern responsibly, implementing thoroughly conventional, market-based policies without any of the catastrophic outcomes the right predicted, these once frightening labels now fade into background noise. That's why moments of candid mockery, like Adam Mockler openly laughing at some of these claims, carry weight. They don't merely ridicule, they underscore the absurdity and detachment from reality in the right's messaging. When progressive figures and centrist Democrats alike are lumped together under the same ideological labels, those words lose any meaningful impact. The right, however, simply shifts the target whenever a scare tactic begins to falter, cycling through new names while maintaining the same worn-out script. The historical pattern is striking. Presidents and top Democratic officials like Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and even Barack Obama were all framed as radical leftists, despite consistently governing from the center and respecting institutional norms. That disconnect is why the rhetoric no longer lands with the same force it once did. Younger voters, in particular, are far less susceptible to these Cold War-era scare tactics, instead focusing on tangible issues: housing affordability, healthcare access, wages, and the stability of democratic institutions. Ideological buzzwords, when unmoored from real-world outcomes, simply ring hollow. Even so, it would be a mistake to assume a single panel or media moment can weaken the broader conservative ecosystem. Abby Phillip's insights are sharp, but the machinery keeps moving, largely unaffected by moments of contradiction. Even cordial exchanges or public praise, like those Mockler discussed, won't stop MAGA-aligned commentators from reverting to the same fear-driven attacks tomorrow. The strategy persists not because it is persuasive, but because it is familiar. What has shifted, however, is the audience itself. More Americans are recognizing the pattern, seeing the predictable cycle for what it is. And once fear stops working, its power to shape the political conversation diminishes significantly. This moment, as highlighted by Abby Phillip, isn't just commentary. It's a reflection of the slow but growing resilience of the electorate against decades of manufactured panic, showing that reasoned critique and evidence-based politics still matter, even in a media landscape dominated by spectacle.